Hey there. Welcome to Delta's Library. I've had a couple of people mention to me that they enjoy just listening to me ramble, and I also know that there's a large majority of the Transformers community that just doesn't know every single detail about every single character. Lord knows, I don't either. So I thought, why not have a second channel where I can just read some TF Wiki articles? Yeah, that's all this is. No opinions, no character deep dives or theories. This is just me reading. And so, why not start off with one of the most requested characters I think a lot of people want to know about, that being Tarn. We're going to be covering him from the IDW 2005 continuity, so there's obviously more iterations of Tarn. If you want to learn more about those, I suggest you check out the article I've linked below. And again, please remember, these are not really my own words. I'm just reading the TF Wiki article for this character, and so on and so forth. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoy the channel. Tarn, aka Deimos and Glitch, is an eloquent Decepticon. He enjoys nothing more than playing beautiful music as he waxes poetic, quoting towards peace and other philosophical works by Megatron. He tends to indulge in these pleasures at the same time he's using his outlier ability to cause Decepticon Justice Division's latest transgressors, Sparks, to self-destruct. The leader of the DJD, Tarn epitomizes the mentality of the team. He is beyond zealous in his devotion to Megatron's cause, going so far as to emboss the Decepticon insignia onto his own faceplate. No traitor, no coward is capable of escaping his team. Despite appearances, Tarn is a mess of contradictions, viewing himself as the central pillar of the DJD. He can be as brutally violent as any other Decepticon, but views himself as a bureaucrat, and his team as administration. He believes his actions are entirely justified, yet sometimes his thoughts are a constant stream of self-denigration. He works hard to run a tight but fair ship, and is not above taking in an open-minded, needed stray. On the other hand, for all his thoughts of sophistication and control, Tarn can go from affable to life-threatening at the least provocation. His addictive tendencies have led to him burning out his original transformation cog years ago, and his reliance on the power-enhancing nuke can lead to his losing himself to the lust for violence. And have no doubt that while he may try and convince himself otherwise, Tarn is a truly sociopathic murderer. Ultimately, whether Tarn is a monster or not is irrelevant. His utter devotion to the Decepticon cause means he will ensure the fear of Megatron is put into any that would consider abandoning their noble goals. Deimos was born an exceptionally powerful 0.1 percenter, and an outlier who possessed the ability to render non-sentient machinery inoperative by touching it, but with one drawback: the power hurt him every time he used it. Before the war, Deimos attended the Jiaxin Academy of Advanced Technology, where they possibly attempted to analyze his brainwave patterns and kept his outlier status hidden from the Senate and Functionist Council. At some point, he crossed the Senate and was subjected to Emperata. His hands and head were replaced to mark him out as someone to shun. After that, to tie in with his power, he started calling himself Glitch. When Orion Pax devised a plan to steal a bomb disguised as the Matrix from Nominus Prime's corpse, his senator friend recruited Deimos, Windcharger, and Skids from the Academy to participate in the heist. Deimos's part in the plan was to deactivate the deflector beams above the primal basilia, and despite a slight hitch where Deimos accidentally jammed Skid's grappling hook by touching his arm, the plan ultimately succeeded. Following Shockwave's capture and brainwashing by the Senate, the Outliers stuck with Orion Pax and aided him in defending a hotspot in Allion from Sentinel Prime's forces. By this time, Deimos had gotten replacement hands and learned to use his power from a distance, utilizing it to break down Elite Guard vehicles from afar. With help from a group of time travelers from the Lost Light of the Future, the group took down a weapons platform sent to irradiate the hotspot sparks, then had their memories of the travelers wiped by Chrome Dome. Possibly due to interference from his powers, the memory wipes seemed to work less effectively on Deimos. During this whole affair, Orion Pax had recommended reading Megatron's treatise around Glitch. Powerful stuff, he said. Thanks to Chrome Dome's memory wipe only partially working on him, Deimos hung on to Pax's overheard recommendation and took his first step towards a dark path. Exactly how and when Deimos joined the Decepticons is unknown, but Megatron would later claim that he deliberately corrupted Tarn to hurt someone and prove a point. Deimos joined early enough to be at the beginning of Megatron's march across Cybertron. Rebuilt under the supervision of Loeb, Deimos's power and endurance was considered by Prowl to put him on the same level as a Phase Sixer. His mask was taken as a sign of Decepticon supremacy, but at least so he told himself. It really was so nobody would notice when he closed his eyes around Decepticon brutality. In one particular battle during the war, Deimos tussled with Thunderclash. Deimos became Commandant of Grindcore Prison, where he became associated with the Empyrean Suite, playing it at maximum volume to drown out the screams of the prisoners he executed via smelting. In this way, he was trying to deliberately bastardize a song composed by Eucrophia to celebrate Prima and the Citadel of Light. One of his prisoners, soon after the prison's smelting chamber had malfunctioned, was his old comrade, Skids. Deimos bargained with Skids to fix it, telling him that it was a teleport chamber, and 50 prisoners would be released from Grindcore for this, and was able to con Skids into thinking that he could be trusted. Skids was relaxed enough around Deimos to take praise genuinely and push for more freed prisoners later. In the end, Deimos sent all 50 prisoners to the teleportation chamber and cruelly forced Skids to watch it as he used it to execute a group of prisoners, including Skids' cellmate, Quark, melting them down into raw materials for use in the creation of MTOs. Deimos deliberately used the event to cripple Skids' religious faith. After Deimos became leader of the Decepticon Justice Division as Tarn, and would never again use his old name, his powers developed to the point where he could shut down sentient machines using his voice alone. Under him, the group became very focused on paperwork. The Decepticon Empire required good administration, in his view. When Grimlock, who had briefly defected to the Decepticons, returned to the Autobot ranks, Megatron was so incensed by the betrayal that he ordered the DJD to bump the Dinobot leader up to the top of the list. In a subsequent battle against Grimlock, Tarn had his face badly damaged by his opponent. Some 200 years ago, Tarn was present at Megatron's current command center when Starscream returned from a botched mission on Zetaxis. Sometime later, the DJD established a base on the world of Macetine in order to obtain the nuke superfuel there. Tarn coerced Pharma, the head surgeon of the planet's Autobot medical facility known as Delphi, into helping feed his addiction by supplying him with an ever-increasing number of transformation cogs from deceased patients, in exchange for the hospital being unmolested by his team. Pharma would eventually cut Tarn's supply off by facilitating the facility's shutdown. In 2009, following the Surge, Tarn led the DJD to Garrus 9 to find and eliminate his old teacher, Shockwave, who is now the most wanted Decepticon on the DJD's master hit list. After intercepting his vessel, however, they discovered that Shockwave had prepared for this eventuality by staffing his ship with crew members who were also on the list, in hopes of bartering their lives for his own. Tarn opted to ignore the offer, using his voice to slowly talk the old senator to death. but Shockwave was able to blast the radio in time. When Shockwave's backup arrived in the form of Bludgeon and the Monstructor 6, the DJD retreated. Though the war formally ended in 2012, Tarn and his group refused to give up the cause. Indeed, they would only deign to stand down when Megatron personally commanded it, and continued to hunt down those Decepticons that had betrayed the cause that hadn't yet returned to Cybertron. Informed by Decepticon spy Brainstorm that high-priority target Overlord was aboard the starship The Lost Light, Tarn and the DJD continued to work through their list of offenders as they waited for Brainstorm to drop the ship's shielding so they could pick up Overlord's signal. One such unfortunate was Black Shadow, whom Tarn explosively finished off with his deadly voice, after which the team set course for the planet of Clemency to hunt down the Decepticon deserter Fulcrum. Arriving on Clemency, the team discovered a mysterious stasis tube awaiting them. When Tarn investigated, he found it contained a deranged, circuit speeder-enhanced Grimlock, unleashed by Fulcrum and his new allies, the Scavengers. Tarn was soon able to subdue the brain-damaged Dinobot, but was then crushed beneath the foot of a Cybernaut battle mech that Crankcase had activated. Tarn recovered in time to hear Fulcrum deliver a speech to all assembled about Decepticon ideals before apparently committing suicide. At that point, Kaon detected Overlord's long-awaited signal, and Tarn ordered the DJD to head out, but not before warning the surviving scavengers that their names had now made it onto the list. Tracking Overlord's signal, the DJD found the Lost Light, which was, unbeknownst to Tarn and his team, actually one of two versions of the ship created by a malfunction of its quantum generators, near the planet Ofsted 17. Despite having promised Brainstorm they would not harm any of the crew, the discovery that the traitor Deadlock was aboard the ship set the DJD off, and after dealing with him, they set about murdering the rest of the ship. Tarn personally destroyed Ultra Magnus, Swerve, and Cyclonus, and forced a large portion of the crew to transform before executing them, leaving their transformation cogs warm for locating and harvesting. Eventually, Tarn removed a still-restrained and suicidal Overlord's head with a chainsaw, and the DJD left the ship. Sometime during the months that followed, Kaon spontaneously began writhing in agony right in front of Tarn, who tried to get his teammate to tell him what he could do to help, before the mysterious effect subsided. Also, during this time, the DJD welcomed a new member, Nickel, the last survivor of a Cybertronian colony wiped out by the Black Bloc Consortia. At Nickel's insistence, they returned to Ofsted 17 to salvage the quantum engines from the derelict Lost Light. They wound up arriving in the middle of a battle between Consortia and the Galactic Council, who teamed up against the Cybertronians. Under attack by both sides and faced with additional enemy reinforcements, Tarn was forced to retreat, leaving Voss and Kaon behind. Tarn eventually gifted Nickel a phone onto which he recorded a message she could use to paralyze people who were threatening her. The diminished DJD returned to their duties, though Tarn began to weary of the work. After apprehending the Spark Eater-worshipping Blip, Tarn was about to end his life using his own voice, until Blip used his last words to demand that Tarn remove his mask. Affronted, Tarn allowed Helix and Tesaurus to finish Blip instead, averting his gaze beneath his mask. Tarn subsequently ordered performance reviews for the team and nearly came to blows with Tesaurus, when he implied that abandoning Voss and Kaon was not the Decepticon thing to do. Calming himself, Tarn explained that they were returning to Ofsted 17 again in order to recover their bodies, but was interrupted by Helix's announcement that Voss and Kaon had returned to the ship safe, sound, and with something unbelievable. A post-war edition of Towards Peace that revealed Megatron himself had defected from the Decepticons. His world shattered by this discovery, Tarn had the DJD return to Mesitine, where he attempted to fatally overdose on Nuke. Finding even the sensation of dying disappointing, Tarn opened his eyes to see a distraught Nickel pressed against the glass of his fueling capsule. The sight of her triggered a revelation for Tarn. She was a bot who had experienced firsthand the threat the predominantly organic universe posed to Cybertronians, and who had fully embraced the Decepticon cause despite living her life outside of the war. The cause, Tarn now realized, was bigger than any one bot. Bigger than Megatron. Galvanized, Tarn set up a meeting with the rogue Decepticon warlord Deathsaurus aboard his stolen Warlord. Knowing full well that he was on the DJD's list, Deathsaurus preemptively attacked Tarn upon his arrival, even deactivating his audio receptors to protect himself from Tarn's voice. But Tarn was able to communicate with him and his troops through inter-Decepticon radio and explain the reason for their presence. He wished them to ally with him, in return for being taken off of the list. Deathsaurus agreed on the condition that Tarn kill the rest of the DJD, which Tarn refused to do, which was the response Deathsaurus had been hoping for. With their alliance cemented, Tarn declared their new objective: kill the traitorous Megatron and all of his allies. The allied forces of Tarn and Deathsaurus proceeded to attack the Necrobot's world, killing its sole inhabitant and using his machinery to broadcast a message that lured Megatron and all those aboard the Lost Light, sympathetic to him, down to the planet. When they arrived, the villains shot them down and cornered them in the Necrobot's fortress. As an act of indirect torture, Tarn had their forces pull back, warning Megatron and his comrades that they would return at sunset, leaving them to stew in their own fear. Returning to the peaceful tyranny, Tarn spent the time showing off his collection of Megatron's writing to Deathsaurus, and discussing tactics with his men. He did not take Terrace's concerns about the Necrobot's fortress storm shield seriously, but the discussion was interrupted by a call on Tarn's personal communicator from Megatron himself. Tarn agreed to a meeting with Megatron alone, whereupon his former leader agreed to surrender in exchange for the rest of the Autobots being allowed to go free. Saddened and disgusted to truly see with his own eyes how far his idol had fallen, Tarn beat him within an inch of his life, and was just about to deliver the killing blow when Overlord suddenly appeared, insisting that it was his right to end Megatron's life. Both refused to stand down, resulting in a bickering battle between the two that gave Megatron the chance to escape. Realizing their folly, Tarn and Overlord agreed to a truce, though Overlord continued to needle Tarn all the way back to the peaceful tyranny. The final straw came when a distraught Kaon arrived with the news that the Autobots had kidnapped the DJD's pet Spark Eater. Determined to cut out of both the hearts of himself and his men the compassion that he saw as Megatron's downfall, Tarn slew Kaon on the spot, tearing his head from his shoulders. At sundown, Tarn led the Decepticons in their attack, playing the Imperium suite across the battlefield as battle commenced. He initially hung back with Deathsaurus, but joined the fight in earnest after a temporary power-up acquired by the Autobots wore off, ripping Ravage clean in half. Unfortunately, that turned out to be just the thing to bring Megatron out onto the battlefield, cutting swaths through Decepticon troops. Tarn superstitiously ordered the DJD to retreat, whilst demanding Deathsaurus' troops to enact a suicidal assault on Megatron. When the ex-Decepticon's new fusion cannon was destroyed, he unexpectedly sunk to his knees in panicked defeat, and Tarn and Overlord moved to strike the final blow together. Their shots, however, were reflected by the sudden activation of a force field by Megatron. Whilst Overlord and Deathsaurus abandoned the planet, Unwilling to waste their time and troops, respectively, on Megatron, Tarn and the other remaining members of the DJD assaulted the force field until they could finally force their way in. Things went very badly wrong after that. As soon as the DJD were all inside, Megatron rose to his feet and chided Tarn, ripping the DJD leader's fusion cannon off in disgust. With the dawning horror of the DJD, realized everything was all according to Megatron's plan. After years of studying, he had finally managed to interlink his systems with a black hole to harvester antimatter, and he had no intention of letting any of them leave alive. With his former enforcers now trapped, Megatron tore through them with tendrils of antimatter, speaking their true names at the moments of their deaths. Tarn was saved last, his mask ripped off as Megatron called him by his previous name, Glitch. Tarn first begged Megatron to be reasonable, then tried to fake bravado, just as many of his own victims had done, and with as little success. Completing his denouncement of his former enforcer, Megatron informed Deimos that everything you did was for nothing, and obliterated him with antimatter. Much later, when Nickel was on the verge of being killed by Scorponok, she used Tarn's voicemail message to paralyze the ex-Decepticon, allowing her and the scavengers to escape. In the notes section of the TF Wiki article, we read that Tarn's true identity was a mystery all the way up until his final appearance in issue number 55. A popular theory was that he was Roller, a character who suspiciously had gone missing sometime before the events of Megatron Origin and Autocracy, and More Than Meets the Eye, issue 36, even dropped a few clues that furthered this interpretation, with issue 55 directly playing on readers' expectations by having Velocity ask who Tarn really was, right before revealing that Roller was in fact still alive and well. Still, James Roberts' notes for the series suggested that Tarn and Glitch were not initially conceived as being the same character, leading to the speculation that plans for Tarn's identity may have changed or developed as the series progressed, and Roberts was able to gauge readers' theories. Deimos' nickname is derived from the historical figure Nostradamus. Deimos' original body is based on War for Cybertron Bumblebee, meaning it probably turned into a similar Cybertronian car. According to James Robert, Deimos was forged in the city of Tarn. James Roberts described Tarn as a Phase Sixer. This is not the first time this has come up. More Than Meets the Eye, issue number 14, had Prowl compare Tarn to known Phase Sixers Overlord and Sixshot, but given the fact that Tarn does his own thing and doesn't follow infiltration protocol, it's likely an offhand comment referring to his specific power level, and not a direct commentary on his role within the Decepticon army. And finally, creator Alex Milne's ideal voice for Tarn is Keith David. If you'd like to know more about Tarn, then I highly suggest you click the link below. This is the article from TF Wiki that I was reading from today. There's a general summary, and every single moment that we talked about here has a link to the specific issue within the comic series that it happened in. Thanks for watching. See you later.